We good? Okay, you guys. So, welcome to week 2 of e-learning with Carrie and Mr. Bowditch. We only have 3 chapters left, so we're gonna do one. It seems like only 2. Wait a minute. 2 or 3, let me just double check here. We're gonna finish this week. Oh yeah, 3 chapters left. And so we'll do one Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday, you'll finish your summary. So please work on it this Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday if you need to work on catching up with it. So then Thursday, you'll just have a little bit left to do and then finish up. So you won't have it. I don't want you to have homework over the Easter weekend, okay? But I'm excited we get to finish this book. This chapter 22 is called Science and Sumatra. And if we remember from last week, Zach, who was Amanda Lem's, what was the last name? Amanda Harvey, so Lem's wife. Her brother Zach was kind of bitter because of the boat crashes that happened because of book sailing, but book sailing is good, but there were just mistakes in moors, so he was just kind of a bitter guy, and he came and was kind of happy to tell them, Nate and 2 other guys, their ship had been lost. Thankfully no men died, which is wonderful news, but the ship was lost, and so Nate lost his money that was on that ship, that used to buy that ship. So now the next chapter, Dr. Hollyoak went with Nate to see the crew and get word of the John, and so John is the ship that crashed and sank. There was no doubt about the loss, which means the ship was lost. Polly was waiting for them when they returned. She knew what rankled in Nate's mind, beyond the loss and the disappointment. "Don't think about what Zach Selby said, dear," she said. "About books? Who's Zach Selby?" Saying like, don't worry about his criticism. Dr. Hollyoak sighed. "He speaks for a lot of men, Polly. I'm not saying there are many as mean-spirited as he is, thank heaven, but there are hundreds, thousands, who don't believe in book sailing. You know, seafaring is a lot like medicine. On the one hand, superstition and old wives' tales. On the other hand, the scientist, trying to solve the puzzles and find the answers. And all through the ages, men have believed the superstitions and doubted the scientist. Natural, I suppose. You believe what you grew up believing. It's hard to change. You can't remember, Polly, when we first started inoculating for smallpox." He shook his head. "Wonder to me I wasn't lynched. Inoculation was risky, but not as bad as the epidemics of smallpox. Then vaccination came along. It was safer, but people raised almost as much fuss. All my life, I felt as though I've made 3 steps forward with science and got dragged back 2 steps by the ignorance and superstitions of mankind. And every time a doctor loses a patient, which means a patient would die for some reason, no matter why, it gives science another setback. And every time a ship is lost," Nate added, "it gives scientific navigation a setback too. Men blame the books. They've been right to blame them sometimes. There have been errors in the books, and when you depend on a book and it has a mistake, you'd have been safer not depending on it." "But your book isn't going to have any mistakes," Polly said, "and when men depend on it—" Nate didn't smile. "It will take a long time to convince them." Dr. Hollyoak nodded. Polly protested. "But what after the East India Society said?" Dr. Hollyoak smiled wryly. "That ought to convince all America but Salem. A prophet is without honor in his own country, you know," which is a Bible verse he's quoting. "What if England accepts the books? That would convince even Salem, wouldn't it?" Nate laughed, but shook his head. "You could never convince an Englishman that anything out of America was better than something made in England." "Never?" said Polly asked. "Not a chance," Nate told her. Late in March, Dr. Hollyoak brought them a Newbery paper. "Listen to this," he read. To the honor of the scientific knowledge of Mr. Nathaniel Bowditch of Salem, Massachusetts, we have informed that one copy of his new American Practical Navigator was sold in London to 2 nautical booksellers by Mr. Blunt of this town for 200 guineas, and an edition of 6,000 copies is now in press. Moore's Practical Navigator has depreciated, which means gone down in value, very much in that country, owing to the numerous errors which have been fatal to mariners. So they know that because of Moore, all the mistakes in Moore's, a lot of sailors have died. So it's not a very popular book anymore. So now they're looking at Nate's book, which is exciting. Polly's eyes glowed. There, Nate, who said England would never accept an American book? I guess the world will believe you now. Maybe, Nate said. If I'd been a sailing master myself, in full command of a ship. He said no more. But early in the summer he came home with something in his mind. He had been asked to go as captain, supercargo, and part owner on a voyage to Sumatra and the Pepper Islands. I had a long talk with Mr. Lawrence today, he told Polly. He has his eye on a new vessel, the Putnam. Well, Polly? Polly caught her breath and then smiled. Master and supercargo both? Captain Bowditch, you'll be a busy man. Nate hugged her. Bless you, Polly. So she gave her consent that he could be go sailing again. And he got a promotion. Now he's going to be the captain, which is exciting. He soon found he was a busy man. Preparations for the voyage kept him running here and there and everywhere. In August, he had to make a trip to Boston. I'm sailing in Miller's sloop, he said. Lots more pleasant than a stagecoach in August. It'll help you get your sea legs again, Polly said. Have a good trip. I shan't be long, Nate promised. Miller promised, too. I'll have him back in short order, Mrs. Bowditch. And they made the trip down in good time, but the morning they were ready to leave Boston, they were becalmed, which again means there's no wind. Miller was disgusted. Of all the infernal luck, he growled. I promised your wife I would have you back in short order. Look at me now. Be calmed. On a sudden impulse, Nate said, It suits me fine. Today is commencement day at Harvard. I've always intended to go. Miller eyed him suspiciously. You're not just saying that to make me feel good. No, Nate told him, I've always wanted to go. But so now they're becalmed, so they're not moving, so they got off the ship, so Nate is now in Boston. Remember when he was a young boy, he always wanted to go to Harvard, so now he wants to go and kind of just watch the ceremony, which it's May, so it's like their graduation ceremony. But when Nate sat alone in the crowd and watched the fresh-faced boys getting their degrees, he knew it had been a mistake to come. It only brought back a heartache that was better forgotten. Harvard men. In spite of everything, the buried memories rose up to nag him. So he's just feeling sad about that opportunity that he never got to go there. Again, he was a boy of 12, sitting at the breakfast table, filled with bubbling joy because he was going to go back to school, he thought. Again, he saw the frown on his father's face, in the tired shadows under Mary's eyes. Again, he saw the paper that had sealed his fate for 9 years. Nathaniel Bowditch, indentured. From the platform, President Willard's voice interrupted Nate's thoughts. He heard a name that sounded something like Bowditch, dressed up in Latin. Some relative, Nate wondered. When the ceremonies had ended, Nate walked slowly out into the sun again. He'd been a fool to come. He straightened and tried to throw off his depression. Forget it, he told himself. Behind him, someone called, Nathaniel Bowditch! He turned. The years had whitened the man's hair, but Nate recognized him. The Mr. Morris who had offered him a chance to tutor his children if he could be free to leave the chandlery. Mr. Morris gripped his hand. Congratulations, Mr. Bowditch. He put his arm around a young man's shoulders. My son John. He said, John, this is Mr. Bowditch, the man I was telling you about. The man who got a degree from Harvard without ever setting foot in a classroom. What? Nate said. Didn't you hear them awarded this morning? Nathaniel Bowditch, A.M. I suppose I was thinking of something, Nate said. In a happy daze, he listened while Mr. Morris talked. In a happy daze, he smiled and answered the boys' questions. Pardon me. Nathaniel Bowditch, Harvard man. So what happened is, sometimes colleges or universities will give an honorary degree to someone because they've been self-taught, but they've done enough study to earn a degree. So that's what Harvard did. They gave him a degree as if he had studied there because he taught himself and was so highly educated. So that's pretty cool, right? How the things turn out. So he was given a legitimate degree from Harvard University. That night, when he turned in, he lay smiling into the darkness. This, he told himself, was the proudest day of his life. He had been home in Salem a few days when the letter came from Harvard. Cambridge, August 31st, 1802. Sir, I have the pleasure of informing you officially that on commencement day, the 25th instant, the degree of Master of Arts was conferred on you. It gives me further pleasure to acquaint you that this degree was unanimously voted by the corporation of the university and unanimously confirmed by the overseers. I am, sir, with much esteem, your very humble servant, Joseph Willard, President of Harvard College. Nathaniel Bowditch, A.M. Polly said, oh, Nate, if only we could paint that on the putman. Captain Bowditch, A.M., commanding. Nate chuckled and hugged her. Bless Polly, he hadn't thought anything could make him happier than he had been on the 25th. But Polly had a way of sharing things. Come along up to my study, he said. I have papers to sort. Work goes much faster when you're there, too. They were working that night in his study when someone hammered on the front door. They heard a hoarse shout, Ahoy, the ship! Polly jumped to her feet. Something's happened. Someone's been splicing the main brace. Nate guessed. I'll quiet him. He raced down the stairs, but not before more hammering fairly shook the house. Ahoy, the ship! I'll ahoy you, Nate muttered and flung open the door. Just what the? Lem? Lem Harvey? Oh my goodness. Come in, man, come in. And Nate was bellowing as loud as Lem. Polly, come down and see who's here. We thought Lem was dead. What happened? Lem crushed Nate's hand and pounded his back and bellowed with cheerful profanity. I knew there was one man in Salem who wouldn't think I was a ghost. Nate wiggled his fingers to see if they still worked. You're flesh and blood, all right, and bone and muscle. Come in, man, and sit down. Lem was too excited to sit down. He grinned at Polly and paced the floor as he told his story. When the Betsy struck, we launched the boats. I headed straight out from land. Nate said, good man, because remember when they crashed, Nate had said when that boy explained it, if they had gone out away from the land, they would have been safe, and that's just what Lem did. There were 6 of us when we started. Lem stopped for a moment. I guess if the storm had let up, so we could have told where we were, but for 2 days we didn't do anything but fight the sea and bail the boat. Then fog. He stood a moment, his shoulders slumped, staring into the past. Man, were you ever lost in a fog? That's when they started cracking up. The first one. Polly shuddered. Lem glanced at her and then skipped. Well, the upshot of it, that I was picked up by the Julius, bound for Sumatra. What a journey that was. Everything that could happen to one ship happened to the Julius. So even though they were close to home, when the ship that Lem Harvey was on crashed, the ship that picked him up because he was going out to sea was going way far away, and of course we know they didn't have phones or anything, so nobody knew that he was alive. And then they had problems on that ship. But when we got to Sumatra, we did all right. The captain really got himself a cargo of pepper, and I got this. He whipped out a short dagger with an ivory handle and a wavy blade. What in the world? Polly asked. It's a crease, ma'am, a Malay dagger. They got all sizes and shapes, long and short, wavy and straight, but this is the one that works fastest. I was on anchor watch when I sort of felt something behind me. Didn't hear a thing, the way those brown devils can, begging your pardon, ma'am, swarm up the cable. Well, anyhow, he got it instead of me. He got it instead of me, and then I got it. If you understand what I mean, I grabbed it, and Nate interrupted hastily. You say the captain did all right in Sumatra, a good cargo of pepper? Lem is telling us a kind of dangerous story, and so then Nate tries to change the subject so his wife doesn't get scared of sailing stories. And so anyway, he brings up about the cargo of pepper, and then Lem changes this, stops talking about the scary stuff. Oh, yes, sir. Would you like to go to Sumatra again? Lem stared, because that's where Nate's going to go, right? Me? No, sir. Once is enough. If you ask me, once is too often. Because of the way they fight? Polly asked. So now Polly's getting a little nervous. Lem shrugged. Oh, that's not the half of it. You see, ma'am. And he's going to start talking again, telling more stories. So Nate interrupts again, quickly. I'd like to talk to you about the business end of it, Lem. Lem shook his head. I don't know much about that part of it. All I know is that the captain and his clerk went ashore every day there was trading to do. The rest of us, we stayed on board and kept our fingers crossed that they'd get back. You see, Nate again tried to haul him around another tack. How was the scenery? Lem shrugged again. Full of trees, with a battle-chewing Malay behind each one. Remember the first time we saw a fellow chewing betel? And when he spit, it looked like blood. Man, you'd think the fellow's throat was cut. Yes. But they don't generally go for the throat with these daggers. Oh my goodness, they rip right into. It was no use, Nate said. I'm sorry you wouldn't like to make another trip to Sumatra, Lem. I'm leaving soon there myself, commanding the Putnam. A grin split Lem's face. Why didn't you say so? If you're going, I'll go too. I'll sign up on anything, from second mate to cook. Polly looked at him, puzzled. But you said... Lem's gestures tossed it aside. That was just talk. I was just spinning yarns. Sumatra's fine. Pretty country, real pretty. And the people? Polly asked. Lem scratched his head. The people? He looked at the dagger in his hand. I'll bet they're nice too, ma'am, when a fellow gets to know 'em. Now, take this fellow that I got the crease from. Probably wasn't anything personal about it. He didn't really have anything against me. It was just for a moment he was stumped, and then he grinned. Maybe he'd just run amok. You know, they all do. Or they do that. All at once, they just get tired of living and they go crazy. Oh my goodness. They start out with a whoop and a holler, knifing left and right till someone... He stopped again. Look here, I'm keeping you folks up too late. He ambled to the door. Remember, Captain Bowditch, I'm signing on the Putman. Yes, sir. Now, I'll clear for home so you can get some sleep. He grinned at them, saluted with his dagger, and was gone. We just have like another page left. Polly shuddered. I'm sorry, I know you know there's a page left because you're following along with me. Polly shuddered and hid her face in her hands. So we can get some sleep, he says. Oh, Nate. So she's really worried now, all the stories he was telling. Now you mustn't mind the things Lem said. All sailors. It wasn't what he said, Polly told him. It was what he skipped. But I'm glad he wants to go with you. Yes, Nate agreed. He's a master hand with the guns, and when I mean he's an all-around Nathaniel Bowditch. Polly was stern. You don't start skipping things too, Nate promised. In November, a week before the Putman was to sail, a boy stopped with a message for Nate. Dr. Hollyoak says to tell you he is ready, sir. Dr. Hollyoak says to tell you he has it ready, sir. Polly looked worried. Is something wrong, Nate? No, just some supplies for the Putman. Come along with me. Dr. Hollyoak was waiting for them. Polly smiled at him. Dr. Hollyoak, you're amazing. You could pass for 50. Dr. Hollyoak said, bosh, but he grinned. Thing that keeps me fit is keeping busy. I'll probably die with my boots on. Doctors and sailing masters. Well, here it is, Nate. He opened a small wooden chest. Some of everything you might need. Polly gasped. All that medicine? Is Nate sick? No, child, Dr. Hollyoak chuckled. This is for the crew. When a ship's off soundings, the captain is on his own. Doctor, lawyer, merchant, chief. He looked down into the chest. His eyes twinkled. Plenty of jalap there, Nate. Best thing in the world. If a man tries to soldier on you and play sick, good dose of jalap. Don't think you'll have any trouble, though. Good men. I don't know about old Chad's grandson Corey. Little skittery yet. Not enough keel there or something. He'll probably work out, though, Polly said. Nate's depending a lot on Lem. I understand Lem's a good man with the guns. Dr. Hollyoak nodded. Yes, in 1 year in Sumatra. Now let me see. Anything I forgot? So again, nobody wants to talk about Sumatra sounds a little bit dangerous because they keep they start telling stories and then they change the subject. So he says, now let me see. Anything I forgot? Jala, Peruvian bark, and the door opened and Amanda Harvey stumbled into the room panting. She needed the doctor right away. Lem had broken his leg. So we will stop right there. All right, guys, we'll see you tomorrow for chapter 23.